future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
And greetings and salutations, everyone. We are back, and thank you so much for tuning in. We are Dr. Judy WTF, which, of course, is What the Freud. And we have a very real and special guest in the house tonight, as well as a real and special Dr. Judy. And you can catch us right here on UBN Radio Network, and also Stitcher, iTunes, and hopefully soon to be iHeartRadio. And this just in, we have an amazingly special and long-awaited announcement. Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect book is finally out and is available on Amazon. And you can go there right now and order the book. And the reviews are actually amazing. So I thought I would start with one. And this is one review, and you can see it there on Amazon. The opening quote of this book is from Sensa, about opportunities for human kindness. Dr. Judy's focus is on healing problems starting from infanthood and early childhood without casting blame on parents or other caregivers. In fact, part of her therapy is to reconcile family members and heal the rifts and resentments people have carried around for decades, maybe their whole life. Dr. Judy's mind map system is so revolutionary and simple that it is designed to change the direction of therapy, and if I might add, short order. After all, who wants to waste years with Freudian theorists who provide no guidance but collect high fees for many years when you can sit down with Dr. Judy and her team and resolve your problems in weeks? I've watched the development of this therapy and the book for a decade or more. If you want to improve your life and your relationships, read the book. It's short, easy to understand, and will remove the weight off your shoulders. So, you know what that deserves?
A round of applause.
Yeah, definitely a round of applause. The audience is thrilled. So, these are amazing, amazing stocking stuffers that you have to go get, and they'll even fit in your stocking stuffer because you want to be the first to be the cause in your life and in relationships. How's that one? That's mine.
Thank you, Walt. I
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
It was a long journey, so I'm much relieved. I know I've been talking about the book, and here it is. So I guess now I'll have to write another book, but not till next year. I'm taking a little break.
Been talking about the book for years.
Yeah. And I do want to add that I really appreciate our audience very much. And for those of you who are interested in purchasing the book, and of course, if you have any comments or questions or want to like us or put a review up on Amazon.com, it is much appreciated.
Yes. And today we have a special guest in studio, Joel Greenstein, who is actually has personal firsthand experience on abuse, substance abuse. And if you recall, we did a show on alcoholism back October 1st. So this is just sort of a carryover of what we did there, sort of a prelude, and we didn't even know it. So your timing is exquisite, Joel. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
So, Joel, I just wanted to say that I've known you for a long time. We've known each other for a long time. We've been through darkness and light. I've watched you go through your darkness, and I've really, really been very impressed with the way that you've come into the light. And I just have a feeling that you're going to be a beacon of light to a lot of the people listening, because there are many people out there who struggle with addiction, as you have. And it is not an easy journey at all. Mm-hmm. And you've definitely earned your right to be sitting here right now and speaking to the audience. And as a matter of fact, Joel is one of the case studies in the book.
Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect.
Right. So maybe, Walt, you can read a little bit
What
about
I want to do
his
is
case
read
study.
a little bit from a chapter called The Precipice. They say it's always darkest before the dawn, As you discover in panel 3, not all bonds are sustainable. Negative bonds inhibit our growth, destroy our sense of well-being, and need to be dismantled at once. Demolishing familiar structures, even misery-causing ones, that have seemed to carry us this far in life, inevitably meet up with the defiance from within. I call this point of the resistance the precipice. Now, remember, folks, if you like this, you can get it. It's at Amazon. I'm reminded of a patient, Jim, at age 29, who thought he could be a recreational user of crystal meth. He found out in a devastating fashion that this was not possible. After an evening of using, Jim and his girlfriend smashed into a wall at 90 miles an hour. Miraculously, they both survived. When Jim came to, he had a decision to make: check into rehab immediately or quell the pain, shame, and regret with more of the drug. Jim was at the precipice.
So Jim / Joel is a survivor in more than one way, more than physically.
Wow.
I think emotionally you've survived. And so take it from there, Joel. So what happened right after that?
Well, that was just the beginning of the struggle for me. And I was at the precipice at that time. Unfortunately, it wasn't my last go-round with addiction. It was one of the more traumatic experiences for me. And it did lead up to the eventuality, which was, you know what, I just couldn't do this. I couldn't do it anymore. And, you know, I don't know how many years I struggled back and forth with that whole idea of, you know, personal powerlessness. But, excuse me, it came to that point where I was on the precipice. You know, it actually says it in the book. It speaks about being on the edge and looking over. And that's where we either have to, you know, ask for help from, you know, from the spiritual realm or die. So I had to have some sort of help, you know, and what it came down to was, you know, I didn't know how to live life. I was fighting against, you know, my personal demons from a very young age, you know, product of a broken home, you know, abused, mother a drug addict, father a drug addict and alcoholic. And it's just not a good recipe when, you know, you have so many things fighting against you.
So you came about this honestly, actually. With both parents being addicts,
both of my parents,
you know, that's what you were exposed to, what you modeled, and
exactly,
and saw, and said, "Well, heck, that's what I know."
Well, it was killing the pain.
Yes.
So, you know, with so much pain and suffering in such, you know, early times in my life, I didn't know what else to do. That's all I could do. I think actually, in a way, drugs and alcohol actually saved my life for many years until it didn't anymore. It was like it was actually going to kill me, and I knew it.
I want to speak to that topic because it's an interesting point that drugs and alcohol, you don't want to say to people, oh, go save your life, go do drugs and alcohol, it'll save your life. But on the other hand, when we are so disconnected from, and audience, you know the rap, I talk about this a lot, in order to form a healthy human psyche, you need mother-infant connection in the form of eye contact and skin contact and consistency, and you need a father who nurtures the mother, you need family safety, you need these basic human ingredients, and if they're missing, then they create what I term, and many other people term, the hole in the soul. So Joel, you and I have talked about the hole in the soul a lot. So from that perspective, I get it, that your hole in the soul was so deep, you could have suicided. So the drugs and the alcohol at some point in your life were necessary to quell the pain and just...
Right, that was my medication.
Self-medicating.
Thank you, exactly.
For many years.
Yeah, for many years until the defense mechanism, which could you put the mind map up, please, so that people
and
can
those of you that
understand the system.
Are listening to this, you can go to drjudywtf.com and see the mind map. And later, of course, we're going to shrink a very, very special song that's never been heard anywhere on air, I don't believe. Yeah,
it's true.
So here's the mind map, all 9 panels. And actually, there's 9 chapters in your book about it.
There are, and this is a mind map journey type of book. And so your panel 1, which is the wounds of childhood, included a severe mother-infant disconnect on many levels, including the fact that she was not able to be emotionally present to you because she was also suffering from her multi-generational wounds of her hole in the soul. So again, understand that this is not a blame-shame model. This is a multi-generational dis-ease, and it carries from generation to generation. And so it stops here, Joel, because you're not going to carry it to your next generation. And by the way, Joel recently got married.
Congratulations.
And so, yeah, so I met his wife, beautiful woman, and I think they're just amazingly supportive of each other. And so next generation, he's not going to be hole in the souling anybody.
Because
he's
we
not punching any holes into
anybody's soul. We talk about multi-generational here.
Bless you.
I
And
understand
so,
that concept very well.
do you want to expand on it?
Well, my father did unto me what his father did unto him,
there
which
you
was
go.
abandonment. My mother did not know her mother or father either. So the fact that they both left my life, my mother left because of her addiction and then came back and then was diagnosed with HIV and passed away in 93. Also, my father, his father was an alcoholic as well, his father. So he became an alcoholic and did the same thing his father did to him, which was abandon him. So I understand that concept very well of multi-generational. We pass those disorders down to our children.
You know, I when I started formulating my mind map, it was a pretty theory in my mind, and it was based on attachment theory and a lot of information that I learned in school, based on Freudian repetition compulsion and Murray Bowen's multi-generational transmission process concept, and the concept of object relations, of internalizing the parent. And so it was only when I actually started using the system and really mapping it out that I saw it in live action. And so we can see with you, Joel, there was this panel 1, hole in the soul, and the disconnection between the mother and the father, and you were technically in what I call the double dungeon, meaning that in order for a child to feel a sense of self, you have to look to your parents to self-define. And you
Both
had
your
no
mother
parents.
and your father.
Right.
Yeah, so there was this emptiness. You were basically staring into the darkness and blaming yourself for being empty, and then having the consequences of being empty and needing to fill that emptiness, and in the meantime having no skills to self-soothe, no skills to manage your emotions, because that's the mother's job.
I was
Okay.
actually very lucky and fortunate to have family members who were very supportive during this whole time, but I don't think anything could ever fill the gap that my mother and father
Absolutely
left.
not.
I had a great family, actually. It's just that my parents were so damaged. And this is not blame or shame, by the way. I have learned, I don't know if that's a different panel. I'm sure, I believe it's a different panel, but I got to the place of acceptance and total forgiveness of my mother because I saw where her disease was. And she was actually sober before she passed away.
Wow.
And I've also forgiven my father as well.
Now, is your father still alive, or is he?
I believe he is.
You
Yeah,
believe so.
I believe he
Yeah,
is.
wow.
Yeah.
And I know you have a wonderful uncle, and you're
Yes.
connected to your uncle and other family members. And hopefully you'll be connecting with me more, because we've been very close for many years.
Like my
and
mother.
Yeah, actually, I kind of enjoy.
You actually
that.
adopted me a few years ago off the books, but
Yeah,
I remember that.
yeah,
I speak about it very fondly
yeah.
to my wife and to my friends. So
Well, I'm really proud to have you
it's
here,
actually
Sonny.
it's
It's
actually
true.
made quite a difference in my life to have another psychologist in my life.
All you needed was another psychologist, right?
My aunt was a child psychologist.
Yeah, but I'm just mom, so.
Well,
Okay.
thank you, doctor. You know, one of the things I know we can dive into, if you're interested, is I found an article, 13 myths about substance abuse and treatment.
Okay.
And I thought that would be interesting and apropos, and from definitely from your perspective, since you've been on both sides.
I can verify.
About the pains and perils and privileges of that. Myth number one is drug addiction is voluntary behavior. And the point is that it may start out being voluntary, but it then becomes compulsive.
I would believe that to be true.
Yes, and compulsive and even uncontrollable.
Definitely involuntary after you have become completely powerless over the drug. It is no longer a choice. It is just what you do in order to survive in the world at some point. What was the other point?
Well, it's just compulsive and even uncontrollable at times. In other words,
Compulsive and uncontrollable. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
me.
Myth number two,
Absolutely.
more than anything else, drug addiction is a character flaw. And every type of drug abuse has its own individual mechanism for changing how the brain functions. But regardless, it's gonna have its effects. Changes in the molecules of your cells make up the brain, mood changes, and of course, memory processes are affected as well. So, there's a huge impact.
Bit of myth.
That's a myth? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Not necessarily completely, but as far as brain damage, yes, I am definitely, I do see the effect that drugs and alcohol has had on my brain chemistry. I like to believe that some of it has come back to me over the past 5 years.
From a neurological perspective, your brain's been rewired.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And I believe that's another book, Rewired. I'm not sure. A friend of mine wrote that
Oh.
book.
Okay.
Sure.
Myth number three, you have to want drug treatment to be effective.
Absolutely.
And no one wants drug treatment, and either it's court ordered many times or a loved one urges you to go. But the programs in which they face, quote, high pressure to confront and attempt to surmount the addiction to do compulsory better treatment, regardless of the reason they sought treatment in the first place. So they're saying that sometimes if you don't want to go, but you end up accepting it and getting better in the process.
Sure.
Okay.
I believe that to be true as well.
All right.
Just for the simple fact that not every, I believe that, actually the cops worked in my favor a couple of times by removing me from bad situations, living on the street, etc., drug use. And that actually spurred me into some sort of right action, and also sent me to rehab a couple of times, willing and unwilling, several different times. But yes, that can be true as far as forcing someone to go against their will. Yeah, not so much, but maybe letting them have their own consequences of their actions, getting picked up by the cops a couple times, having traumatic experiences usually spurs them into right action, one way or the other.
Well, we're going to talk about in a minute about rock bottom. So I don't know if you actually hit rock bottom in your situation before you really decided to get help, or if you realized I don't want to get down that far before
Right.
I really need to. I don't know which side of the.
It may not be that simple.
Well,
as far as the bottom, the rock bottom, there's several bottoms I believe that I had.
I think you did. I mean, one of
Yeah.
them was hitting that wall at 90 miles
yeah.
an hour. That was one bottom.
Mhm.
And then I think you mentioned
was
that
definitely one.
you still had other bottoms
Yeah,
that
I think
you
that,
crashed into.
I think after that, it was more of an idea of me dealing with my own karma and, getting sober for a time and then still having that pain inside and then having to go back and suffer some more. It was almost like a self-induced suffering of my own karma. I believe I brought it on myself to still continue to suffer.
Well, it's difficult because in some respects it's all you knew, and it's so easy to go back to what you know, whether it's good or
Absolutely.
bad. It's your comfort, it's the hole in the soul you're trying to fill, and it's what you've been around, what you grew up with, and it's change is really hard.
Yeah, actually, this song was actually written
The song "We're Gonna Shrink."
right around the time that shortly after I ran into that wall. That was when I
I had
actually
no
wrote
idea. This is so beautiful. I've been listening to Joel's music over the weekend, and it's really profound and beautiful. And I just know that you're going to affect a lot of people, and I'm happy to be playing it. We're happy to be playing
Absolutely.
it tonight and shrinking it
Yeah.
also, and knowing where
I'm
it came
excited about
from.
it.
Yeah. and just, an opportunity not only just to take a tune where we're not connected to the artist, because a lot of times I don't know the artist, but here you sit and then I can get the backdrop story of what's going on here. How did you deal with all the shame that you must have been facing? Because people tend to be judgmental and angry, of course, and upset. And
some of the program, the 12-step program, talks about forgiveness of others as well as forgiving ourselves. And that was one of the hardest things that I ever had to do, was forgive myself. Aside the fact that, it was very hard to forgive others. But that's what, some of the 12-step program talks about that, if we are not able to forgive others, then, basically we're going to be lost. That's where it starts, is forgiveness and understanding of others as well. So that I kind of live by that code now. No matter how sick somebody is, I pray for them, not always. I'm saying this isn't a perfect program. I still, get mad and scream at people in my car, even though they can't really hear me. But I also have the capacity to realize that, this is affecting me in a negative way, and maybe I should, try to remove the thoughts that I'm having in the moment and pray for myself and for the other people.
So I have a question to ask you, because in the mind map model that I put together, forgiveness is a last step. So the way that I work with people is that before they're able to forgive or process the forgiveness piece, they have to literally express the repressed anger and the hurt. And so that part of the journey is taking them through the anger and the hurt that they've repressed against the cause, even though your mother's certainly not to blame because she had absent parents as well, right? And your father as well. However, so
that was definitely, it's very important to have to go through that struggle. That was, without question, was this, it was the tipping point. Some of that pain and suffering, when I got to that bottom this last time, I was just so tired and so beat that, I had been up for several days, and I didn't know, I was like slipping in and out of consciousness, I believe. And I believe in that moment, that's when I actually I turned everything over. I was done. And it was just through that whole pain and self-induced suffering I sat down somewhere and I just asked the question, why am I still doing this to myself? And if it wasn't for all that pain and suffering, maybe I would have just kept going,
Good chance.
Yeah, it was a very good chance, or at least trying to kill that pain.
Yeah.
It just wasn't working anymore.
So a lot of people enter 12-step programs and they don't necessarily believe in a higher power. Some people who go through recovery are atheists and are agnostic.
It's a growing number.
And some people just don't want to walk that path, which is perfectly fine. Everybody has a pathway, okay?
I think they're technically blocked from that kind of the ideas of a higher power or a God. Turn off your TV for a while,
There's an idea.
Look at the stars, Look at the earth. I don't know, some of the things that, have spurred me into believing in something other than, what I can just plainly see in front of me. I think, it might take some time for these the younger generation,
I thought you were the younger
I was going to say, he's not.
I'm probably
I thought I was
not
looking
as young.
at the younger generation.
Sometimes when I go to the gym, my body still thinks I'm 20, but my mind thinks I'm 20, but then later on, my body reminds me that I'm closer to 40.
I didn't know that. Wow, time flies.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. So I do want to explore that, and I don't have the statistics. Walt, maybe you do. I know that some people go through the statistics of,
you're talking about
of people who go the pathway of higher power God versus just
there
higher
is
power,
an article that you
whatever
sent me.
define.
There's a title of an article. And again, if you want any of the information that we're talking about in terms of stuff, WTF. You can always write us at info@drjudywtf.com. And the title of this article is Letting Go of God, How 12-Step Programs Are Losing Their Religion. AA is spiritual, not religious. Now hold my hand while we pray. Is how it starts. And an estimated 69% of Americans believe in some form of one God, according to a 2012 Pew Research. So that's 69%. So obviously down from a bigger number in the past. If you look at Canada, 25% do not believe in God, and in Britain it's as high as 50%. But there's another group that was formed in 1986, Secular Organizations for Sobriety, SOS.
And how do they do? I'm really interested to know.
Which means that AA is a religion. AA is a religion in denial, says one of the founders. Okay, AA itself was born a half a century earlier, and several Oxford group members who themselves broke away from the Oxford group because they found it to be too religious. Okay. The question is, if I want recovery from addiction, can the 12-step work for me without my having to accept someone else's beliefs or deny my own?
And just aside from the
good point.
religion part, I'm just talking about the spiritual aspect of connection to a higher power. Does higher power have to be, as I define it, source energy? God, source, whatever.
Well,
could
that's
it be
just the human word that we have for the spirit
the
of the
star?
universe.
Could it be the universe? Could it be the
Yes.
stars?
Well, first of all,
okay.
it says it directly in the the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that you get to choose your own God.
Got the 12 steps right here. Yeah.
Well, the 12 steps, but I'm talking about in the chapters, it talks about God, but it talks about choosing a God of your own understanding, not of anybody else's understanding.
Okay.
So that's first and foremost.
Well, they talk about here, it says, the 12-step has been adjusted to fit their own interpretation of God. Now it's more universal, higher power. Right. Or some say God of our own understanding.
Right.
What's interesting is in the late 80s, Marijuana Anonymous started, and they point out that their recovery is living by faith, not necessarily with a faith, which I thought was interesting. The guy that wrote the book called entitled "Live Life with Hope" in 1995. But I think interesting, you're living by faith as opposed to with a faith. Higher power means obviously different things to different people. None of the 1930 12-step pioneers could have imagined an addiction to online gaming, for example. It's a little far out.
You mean as a higher power?
No, yes, as a higher power. Yeah.
I'm powerless over online gaming.
Yeah,
My life has become unmanageable.
There's a group for you right there.
Step 3, which in AA says, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand Him. Right? Become something very different in the online gaming, quote, seek the help of someone qualified in counseling or someone that we trust from experience to be capable of helping us. So it's really been, I'm going to say watered down substantially.
And morphing. And
Yes.
so how come no one ever said she instead of he? I'm still waiting for that in one of those articles.
Well, it's been watered down because, if you have made online gaming your higher power,
Right, right.
or a TV or, any sort of technology has become, your master.
But see, you know more about this than Walt and I because you go
by
to
far.
meetings.
Well, not only that,
on a
you've
regular
experienced it
basis.
firsthand.
Absolutely. So just from your inside-out perspective, do you find that people who are connected to, let's just say it, people who are connected to God, to source energy, do you think that they have higher statistics of recovery versus giving it over to a higher power of, I don't know what else that would mean to somebody.
I don't think that
Does it matter?
if you, choose to have a God or choose to not have a God, I don't think that really has anything to do with it. It's just the fact that if you ask whatever energy that you feel like is, in this universe or,
Okay.
I can't really I can't really name statistics.
Well, they talk about willpower in here, which I think is interesting. I wanted you to comment on this. It says it describes AA today as people with whom willpower alone was insufficient for sobriety. And I'm a big believer that willpower won't and can't work.
Right.
And I was just wondering if you would like to comment on that.
I tried on my own self-will for many years. Actually, it's part of the song. I think I can change it on my own power, but it never worked out that way. In my whole 30 years of, beating my head against the wall with self-will, thinking that I can just manage and survive and manage my own life, I failed. I was not able to overcome my addiction just by saying, okay, I'm just going to do this, or fighting against it. It was a losing battle every time.
Well, I wouldn't say you failed. It's just that, you realized you couldn't do it on your own and you didn't get the outcome you wanted simply because you didn't have the tools to do that.
Well, now it's more about connecting with human powers, too. I see God working through, in my life through other people more. So, saying that there's no God out there, I don't necessarily see or hear a God. I see him working through, or
Yes.
he or she working through other people in my life, seeing it as an example. But it just goes to show you, if you're looking for something, you will find it.
Yes.
If you're looking for crap,
Well,
you will see crap.
In the Bible, it does say in the Bible, seek and ye shall find. So,
and the more you seek, the more you will find.
yes, indeed. And the more you knock, the more the doors are going to open. To address your religious issue toward the end of the article, it says in the last 4 years have seen a 40% increase in listed agnostic and atheist AA groups. AA without prayer is the fastest growing segment of the fellowship. And the article finishes with, so change is happening, and not so slowly. Returning to the question, is AA religious? We might just ask, is America religious? Maybe we're asking the wrong question, because maybe Alcoholics Anonymous and other groups of such are reflecting more of what's going on in America as opposed to just in the groups. Because as while the majority of Americans are religious, we live in a pluralistic society that must ensure that minorities are accommodated. Addiction doesn't discriminate, they say. Now, thanks to an ever-increasing tolerance in and out of rooms, recovery doesn't discriminate either.
I wanted to add something to the concept of higher power, which is humility. So I think the concept of a higher power, whatever that means to the individual, means that you're not the know-it-all. You're not the ultimate source of source on a wisdom level of that there's always some. It's a trickle down, because if you look at right, you're not the end all be all. So that when we look at attachment theory, which I talk a lot about. Our source, in terms of the human source, is our mother's. Okay, we come from that womb. We drink from her milk. We look in her eyes. The umbilical cord is attached and then detached, and then dependency, hopefully healthy dependency, is formed. So we're always of an outside-in model. Outside-in. Relationships start by outside-in, and then we become filled within with the emotional nutrients, and then we can start building from the inside out, but it flows from the outside in. So it just seems like that trickle down, if you will, a spiritual trickle down, whatever that is defined as for that individual, comes from a humility.
Definitely.
Does that seem like something that you can relate to?
Walt was talking about the idea of, the AA thing where, okay, now the agnostics are starting their own groups, and that's fine. But, there's in AA, there's a singleness of purpose. It's about, finding something, a fellowship,
Yeah, and someone to be accountable to. I mean, again, we're talking about willpower, and, you can talk about a higher source, but ultimately, I believe that that's vital and very important and an integral part, but you can't do it alone. No man is an island, and we need accountability. We need a partner in terms of helping us through the challenges that we're facing in this regard, and we certainly is impossible to do it alone.
Right.
Yeah,
and what Dr. Judy was talking about with your mother being the primary source of that. I believe that that's where I got that from. That's part of the reason why I have that belief, is because my mother nurtured me as much as she could within those first few years.
Yeah.
And it was I remember it specifically, you know, the head on the chest and, you know, the coddling, so to speak.
Hearing your heartbeat.
Her holding me when I was
Yeah.
a baby. I remember
And
those
that
things.
gets internalized.
So maybe that
Big
would
time.
maybe
Yeah.
that's part of the reason why I have that deep spiritual belief. You know, even though I tried to play God for a long time, you know, and take matters into my own hands, so to speak. You know, I just saw that where my self-will had failed me so many times, you know. And so,
Yeah.
yes, I do believe that if people out there remembered that,
Yeah.
or if they saw that from their mother, that they would actually internalize that. And that would be a God consciousness, you know, perhaps. I'm not saying for sure,
Yeah.
but I know for me, I can say that for myself.
And I do look at things as cursed by designs. I talk a lot about that in my book. And so that these things that we experience that are very painful are ultimately, if we want them to be, and if we make them to be, wisdom lessons. I mean, there's no way that I would have bothered to create a mind map and talk about healing human disconnect if I didn't have my own pains from my own childhood wounds. It just wouldn't be on my map. Okay? And then to take interest in other people's pain was just another history of my own that that created the incentive for me to understand my own, understand yours, understand other people's. And the next book I'm just going to have to write is, I'll put it out there.
It'll be out sooner than the last one.
I don't know. It's going to take a while, but I do want to write a book called Healing Global Disconnect. Be the cause, healing
And
global
that's a kind of a
disconnect.
prelude
And,
of what we're going to be dealing with probably more next year
Yeah.
on our shows, is healing global disconnect. And if
Right.
you're just tuning in, thanks for joining us. You're joining us to Dr. Judy WTF, which of course is What the Freud. And we have a special guest, Joel Goldstein, in the house talking about
Greenstein.
excuse me. I have it in front of me, and I'm just doing it from memory.
My favorite color, green.
Greenstein, and talking about substance abuse, and from a very first-hand experience. He's come out from the other side, and quite wonderfully, I might add. And we were talking about the 13 myths of substance abuse and treatment, and myth number 4 is treatment for drug addiction should be one-shot deal. You know, because
That's
you know
funny.
having repeated treatments is just not kosher, right?
And,
And you're already laughing, so
I
we
think
already
the
know the
fourth
answer.
or fifth one.
yeah, and I want to talk
fifth
about
one
that
was the
because
one
I have patients in my practice as we speak who are ashamed to even call me because they've had relapses. This happens.
Yes, it does.
Okay, and maybe round 1 went very, very well, but then psychosocial pressures, as I called them, people who have so much pressure on them, and then when we don't have the emotional nutrients within, then our bandwidth, I call it the emotional bandwidth, gets short. Okay, so then you take somebody who has a short bandwidth to begin with, and then you load him or her up with work and family responsibilities and you know and health issues and on and on and on and on, and then pretty soon you find that they're imploding and then self-medicating again. What would you tell people like that?
Well, dealing
now what?
with-
You failed several times, okay, and now you're beginning to think,
First of
wow.
all, don't beat yourself up over going back and doing something that was so comfortable to do. And it's just like taking that medicine to calm the world down. So beating yourself up for doing something that just comes like a natural instinct is just, it's counterproductive, first of all.
Well, I always say in the show, I like to say, don't should on yourself. SHOULD. Don't should on yourself. You know, I should have done this. I should have done that. I should. You know, no.
Shoulda, woulda, coulda,
Shoulda, woulda, coulda.
didn't.
Yeah, I say don't should on yourself. Okay. So then, along those lines, we strive to find a quote magic bullet to treat all forms of drug abuse, and there's not one size fits all. There are an array of different treatments for different individuals, and again, that lines relapse. Maybe the treatment you originally got might have worked for a while, but you know it just doesn't quite fit correctly, and so unfortunately, you know, you got to go do it again.
Well, that's why fellowshipping is very important.
Fellowshipping, that's what I
You have to
find.
find somebody that did stuff that's exactly like you, and that
Right.
maybe why is he sober? Why is he staying sober?
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to get into a group and get surrounded by that group. You know, I go to the same group every week
Sure you do.
and talk with the same people.
And you have a
I know-
sponsor, yes? No?
of course I have.
Of
Well,
course.
a sponsor is
imagine you do.
a sponsor is I think supposed to be a one-time deal. They take you through the work, and then I mean inventory processes and things like that are those always have to be done, especially when you start hating the world again or having resentments.
Okay.
But you know, having a group of guys or girls, if you're a lady, or friends in the program that you just talk to on a regular basis, that can have such a great effect.
Well, not only
on
that,
your
it's a
life.
comfort. You're not alone, for goodness
Right.
sakes.
Well,
And,
that's what the biggest problem with
Yeah.
alcoholics and drug addicts is that we think we're so damn special
Yeah.
when there's millions and millions of people out there that are just like us.
Well, no, well, alcoholics specifically. I mean, you know, how close is the local liquor store, right?
Right.
And what do they do at the liquor store? They're selling the
Ease and
drug.
comfort.
And
They're
Christmas
selling
parties
ease and comfort.
coming up, and all kinds of holidays. So what I find very challenging is when somebody comes in for help and they have an overlay of addiction, and they say to me flat out, "I'm not going to go to any 12-step program. You know, I'm just going to come here for therapy." And I say that to them quite honestly, it's not enough. It takes a village, and they say, "I'm not going to go." Okay, so now what?
They have to fall. They have to
Have
fail.
to fall.
They have to
Yeah.
suffer some more.
Yeah.
Well, that's one here. It says here, as we're talking about this, nobody will voluntarily seek treatment until they've hit rock bottom. But before they hit rock bottom, pressure from family or members or employees, and you've addressed it. I mean, maybe yes and maybe no, right? And that's a myth. Treatment just doesn't work. Facts. Studies show that drug treatment reduces drug use by 40 to 60% and can significantly decrease criminal activity during that time as well.
I think that's true. By arming yourself with certain facts, going in and learning about your disease and what it is actually can have a lasting effect on you. I believe it happened for me anyway. I can only speak from my own personal experience, which was, you know, learning about how, you know, how not only was the drugs just a symptom of everything else that had happened in my life, but it was also the reason for using the drugs as well, for, you know, to diminish the pain.
And
so
what
to
do you
speak.
think about family members who go hardcore and they draw the line? And what's the term? They do an intervention or they put a boundary up
Right.
that's very strong, and they say, "Look, if you're not going to stop, then I'm divorcing you. You're out on the street."
Well,
What do you-
ultimatums.
yeah, ultimatums.
My uncle,
what do you
my
think
uncle
about that?
had that same sort of dealings with me personally.
Okay.
He just, you know, kind of cut ties with me. He would see me for a short time and say, "All right, you got to go." You know, there's no, you know, lack of feeling there. It's just, you know, once a person has come to the point where, you know, you have to let them go. You can't continue to try to shield them from their own
In the
suffering
infamous
and
words
pain.
of Dr. James Dobson, I've used it a lot, is love must be tough.
Yeah, the tough.
Okay.
Thank you. That
Yeah,
was
it's
the term
tough
I was
love.
looking.
Yeah.
What do you think
We
of
don't-
tough love?
We don't want people, personally, for myself, I don't want people in my life that give me the soft and easy. You know,
Interesting.
I need people that are going to tell me the hard truths.
Well, what I say
About
is,
myself.
what you're finding is you don't want somebody to co-sign your bullshit.
Exactly.
We all
Thank
have
you for
those
putting it
in our
so
life. Yes, it's like, well,
You'll be frank. I'll be soft.
there you go.
soft.
Yeah,
And
can I
this
be
is
frank? No.
internet radio, so we don't have
Yeah.
any.
So,
So I
you know,
can
it's, a lot of time that people they'll co-sign your junk,
Oh,
right?
all
You know,
the
co-sign
time.
your bullshit.
No.
And listen, or if we're going to be in mainstream media, they'll co-sign your Bravo Sierra.
Oh, I've never heard
Yes.
that. Oh, thank you.
There it is.
Beautiful, beautiful, Walt.
You know,
You have such
it
a way
only
with
took me a
words.
fraction of a second.
It's beautiful.
Yes. So, or you know, if they really are an Alpha Sierra.
ASL.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
So,
I'll be
another
the
the
myth-
wheels
interpreter
are
for
turned.
Frank.
Thanks.
Frank, I'll be your interpreter.
Yeah, we'll be here all week. Thank you so much, Joel. So a couple more, then we're going to shrink our tune. If they've tried one doctor or treatment, they've tried them all, right? Again,
boy.
one size not fit. relapses are for relapses
size
are
does not fit all.
And I like this one. People can successfully finish drug abuse treatment in a couple of weeks if they're truly motivated. Fact: research indicates a minimum of 90 days of treatment for residential and outpatient drug program, and 21 days in short-term inpatient are the best.
That's a tough one.
If they remain at least a year or more, they're twice as likely to remain drug-free. So,
You mean
in other words, it doesn't happen
within,
overnight, basically, is the
if they
information.
true.
remain for 1 year within the treatment plan, you mean
remain in-
inpatient or just connected to?
See, I believe that's a mixed bag.
Go
I
ahead.
can't really say,
Okay.
out of my personal experiences,
Yeah.
I did stay sober a longer period of time in drug rehab. And I also, on the other hand, stayed in drug rehab for 2 weeks and got out and stayed sober this long. So it can't really be said what works and what doesn't. For as far as the cobwebs to clear out, and 90 days just isn't enough, especially if you've been on a 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 year or longer bender, drugs and alcohol and all of that. I mean, it takes a long time for you to regain.
It does. And
some
this,
sort
and the
of
last one, this is
capacity.
people. And the last one here: people who continue to abuse drugs after treatment are hopeless. Drug addiction is a chaotic disorder. Occasional relapse does not mean failure. Addicts are most vulnerable to drug use during the few months immediately following their release. Recovery is a long-term process and frequently requires multiple treatment attempts before complete and consistent sobriety can be achieved.
So
I believe that's can be true as well.
So-
Multiple visits to
So what I'm really wondering about is, now that you have had 5 years of sobriety, how do you self-soothe, and what is different about you, your life, your internal world, where you don't need that self-medication in order to get you through the day?
Well, first of all, the soothing process comes from the idea that I no longer have these false dependencies on outside things to heal me internally. What I do look for is I look outside of myself, but I don't look for food to comfort me or people necessarily to comfort me. I don't have like a reliance on that. I have a reliance on the big picture. The spirit, that I feel in my life is different now. So I no longer have the dependencies that I had on, people, places, things, drugs, the ideas, some of the ideas that I had coming into this whole the recovery scene again for the 4th or 5th or 6th time, whatever the number was. Just everything has changed. I look for people in the program. I look for to my wife, to my friends. The trusting is I believe it's the best. The hardest thing to do is to trust people and to allow them into your life. And to actually believe that, things can change,
Yes, they can. And unfortunately, the clock is a tyrant, and we have to get to our tune here. Now, we have a segment called Shrink That Tune, and we've got a very special tune and written by Joel Greenstein entitled Not Enough Faith. So I'm going to read the lyrics, and Dr. Judy and maybe Joel's going to chime in and shrink it. Then we're going to close out the show by playing the song. Too many feelings, not enough faith. I remember what it's like, but I do it just the same.
Well, how about this? I'm going to let you shrink your own tune. Just kind of use some of the principles of the hole in the soul and the wounds and all of that.
Well, I had to learn to get past my feelings and stop using them as my crutch. That's that's the basic, rundown of the first stanza.
Okay.
So, having all these feelings and these mixed emotions, and remembering what the past was like, and still harboring them and still holding on to them as the crutch. So that's basically what the first part of the song was.
You mean I
about.
do it just the same, meaning the addiction, right? Is that what you mean by it?
Everything.
Everything.
Doing the same thing and expecting things to change. That's,
Okay. Okay.
I believe that's an Einstein thing, right? Or
Yeah, the
doing things the same way and expecting them to be different is the definition of insanity.
yeah.
Right. Doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Right.
Too much depression to realize my strength. I remember what it's like, but I do anyways.
But I do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So too much depression, I'm thinking, there it is, the hole in the soul, which is you go right back into the wound and the reaction to the wound of the disconnect, because Joel's had plenty of disconnect, and the depression is there's nowhere to turn but inward, and there's nothing inside. Okay, so
Or it actually blocks me from my strength.
right, so you're trying to realize your strength, but where are the emotional nutrients to give you the strength, right? So I remember what
Well,
it's
they
like,
sure
but I
weren't
do it
coming from the
anyways.
drugs and alcohol.
Well, you thought they could, so there's the self-medication. So
Right.
I do it anyways. That you're trying to find the strength, but there aren't
not
any
there.
resources.
Yeah,
in there.
it's
Okay.
kind of tough. Tearing out the bottom, heartache. Turn down the pain. You think you can change it, but it stays the same.
Tearing out the broken heartache. Okay, so I think that's just the crushing effect of everything that's ever happened to you. It's just like, now you're broken, so what do? You don't know how to stand up. There's nobody holding you. Hey,
Well,
that's a
tear it
song
out.
right there. Okay? And you want to tear it out, but how do you tear out something, right? That's been basically blueprinted in you. Right? And so we're back to, we need people, we need higher power, we need group support to get us out of that hole.
Yeah. Well, the last part is the chorus, and it's about like personal. It's the powerlessness of the whole situation.
Right.
You just feel completely hopeless, But you think you can change it on your own power, but it stays the same. So that's where it came from.
Yep.
So I'm going to refer back to defense mechanisms, that we use the drug as a defense mechanism against the horrible feeling, but it doesn't really do anything but break you down, and then you recycle through. So it's kind of like, there we go, panel 456, chaos, defenses, breakdowns, chaos, defenses, breakdowns. So first breakdown, second breakdown, where does it stop? Hopefully not in the gutter with your face in vomit and your head smashed into a wall. Hopefully before that point, and hopefully proactive instead of reactive.
Yep. And so that's been the song Not Enough Faith by none other than our guest here, Joel Greenstein. And we're now going to close the show out and play the song. I'm looking forward to hearing it. And you've been listening to, and thank you for watching, Dr. Judy WTF, What the Freud. And we've been addressing abuse and some of the myths that go along with substance abuse. And check out our other show that was on October 1st. Regarding alcoholism, if you want to learn more. And you can write us at info@drjudywtf.com for any questions, comments, or queries. And you can catch us on iTunes, Stitcher, and, of course, here at UBN Radio Network. So thanks for tuning in. God bless everyone, and here's our tune.
Too many feelings, not enough faith. I remember what it's like, but I'll do it anyway. Too much depression to realize my strength. I remember what it's like, but I'll do it just the same. Too many feelings, not enough faith. I remember what it's like, but I do it anyway. Too many feelings, not enough faith. I remember what it's like, but I do it anyway. Tearing out the broken hearted, tearing out my pain. You think you can change it, but it stays the same. Tearing out my broken hearted, tearing out my pain. I think I can change it, but it stays the same. Too many feelings, not enough faith. I remember what it's like, but I do it anyway. Too many feelings, not enough faith. I remember what it's like, but I do it anyway. Tearing out my broken hearted, tearing out my pain. I think I could change it, but it stays the same. Tearing out my broken hearted,